أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين بالقاسم المصطفى محمد ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم أجمعين من الأولين والآخرين إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد صلوات على محمد وآل محمد Mu'mineen, mu'minat, brothers and sisters in Islam and Iman, Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We started off talking about this idea of identity, specifically Muslim identity. These questions that you and I maybe kind of stay up at night trying to figure out who we really are. From there, we tried to figure out, why is it that we have lost this sort of connection to Allah, right? Where Allah had said, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ فَأَنْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. That you forget about Allah, then I make you forget who you really are. Your nafs, your identity is gone. Then these are the types of people who end up becoming fasiq, rebels, people who openly sin, who just don't care anymore. We said, how did we lose this? We went through a few different examples or a few different factors, ranging from tarbiyah, child upbringing, talking about not recognizing what our true origin is, where did we come from, what is our purpose, and looking at the other factors that exist in the world, like our friend circle, the community we're involved in, social media, all that. And then last night, we tried to say, okay, if we accept that there are these issues, there are these problems, well, what are the ways that we can try to get it back? And to do that, we had to first figure out what identity means in the first place, rather than just saying it means values. We said that, look, identity has to do with the way you and I see reality, right? How we look at the world. However we see the world, that's going to affect how I'm going to act, right? So if I think this place is real, I'm going to act as if. If I think it's a dream, I'm going to act as if. So if I see this world in terms of what we say, this tawheedi lens, if I see it in the way that Allah wants to see it, wants me to see it, then I should act as if. If I'm not doing that, that means that lens, those glasses I'm wearing, the ideology, the worldview, whatever you want to call it, whatever I have, there's some break there. There's some malfunction there. I'm not seeing the world as I should. And that is going to cause me to start following somebody else's moral principles. I'm going to start breaking some ahkam here and there. Why? Because that's how I'm seeing the world. I'm seeing it different. Maybe I'm seeing this part's an illusion, but this part's real. We start mixing and matching different ideologies and philosophies. So from there we said, okay, where can we now go and try to build off this? Now, normally this would, these kind of conversations take a lot more time. Usually this conversation, this series gets divided up into 10, 12 nights. This will be our final, let's say, night for lecture and discussion, because tomorrow afternoon will just be the masa'ib. So we'll try to wrap things up tonight as much as possible. So where we start then, as we saw with some of these riwayat, if we saw that we had this kind of deficiency in our iman, that we see that there's this gap in our actions, all these riwayat are saying, look, your actions are going to stem from how much trust you have in Allah in the first place. Do you trust Allah more than your own self? And how much yaqeen do you have in these principles also, right? We said last night from Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib, alayhi salatu wassalam. Allahumma salli ala that afdalul iman husnul iqan, that the best type of iman you can get is when you start having this excellent certainty, right? Iqan ya'ni yaqeen. When we're sure of something, we're really sure of it, then we should not veer from that, right? That should define our ideology, our worldview, and our actions, our patterns, behaviors, thoughts, everything. Okay. Out of everything else, if we're trying to bring that life back to our nafs, again, this last hadith that we left off with, Imam has said, reported to have said, at-tawheed hayatun nafs. Tawheed can bring this hayat, this life back to our soul, back to who we really are. And, we have these issues, like we said, sometimes we question things about salah, we have questions about tawalli and tabarri, we have questions about hajj, and and all the details about religion, people get confused, right? Again, dogs being najis and all this random stuff, which is fine. All those questions about furu' ad-din, normally it's because there's some issue, problem, an error within the usul ad-din. You find most people, if they have a good concept of tawheed, that'll inform and strengthen their idea of nubuwah. If they have a good concept of nubuwah, then that'll inform obviously their level of imam or wilaya, and then onwards to ma'ad or qiyamah, however you want to call that, right? And we framed it in these three questions. Where do we come from? What do we do while we're here? And where do we go after this? So when a person has a strong level of certainty, real certainty in these questions, especially the first one, of understanding that this whole reality is based on tawheed, and again, not just in some random abstract way, but in a real way, then that should, hopefully, inshallah, change the way that we are going to act. So let's start this topic off. If you can recite a salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Every Muslim is required to say these two lines, right? La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. That's what defines us. That first line of La ilaha illallah, right? How do we translate that normally? There is no God but God. There is no God but Allah, right? Now, it should be obvious to us how important that first line is, right? That's where things come. There is no Muhammadur Rasulullah without this La ilaha illallah in the first place, right? Okay. So we know what's important. And okay, we're hearing here that the Imam is saying that Tawheed is supposed to give life to our nafs. Like, okay, fine. And even in other riwayat and other narrations, we see that things go beyond that there's some deeper level to Tawheed as well. In one report that's attributed to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he's reported to have said, At-Tawheed nisfuddin, that Tawheed is half of deen. Like, wow, Tawheed is very important then. So, okay, we can pause for a second and say, all right, we know that Tawheed is important, sure. The Prophet is saying that Tawheed is half of my deen. Like, okay. In our mind right now, right, and I gave a little bit of a preview last night, but what is Tawheed again? How do we translate it? Monotheism, right? Believing in one God, right? Okay. I say La ilaha illallah. I know that there's one God, not 15 or 5,000. That's it. Right? That's Tawheed. I'm a muwahid. I believe in one God. That's it. It's done. So, are we led to believe then, based on these riwayat and everything else that we understand about Islam, that the minute somebody says, okay, I know that there's one God, and that's it, half my deen is done? If that's what we're going to take right now, we take whatever we have with us, is that Tawheed just means believe in one God. Don't be a polytheist. The opposite of that is a monotheist. So if you're a monotheist, you believe in one Allah, that now, according to this, means that half your deen is ready. It's finished. It's done. Does that make sense? Do you think that just saying, I believe in one God, oh, half your deen is ready now? I mean, it would be nice if that's the way it was. It'd make deen kind of easy. But it seems like, doesn't our deen seem a bit deeper than that? Should be more spiritual, something, there should be more depth and breadth. That if you're just going to say believing that there's one creator or one Rabb, whatever it is, that is half of it? No, there's got to be something more. So, okay. Maybe in the back of our minds, we say it's that important, it's that powerful, then it means it can't be that simple. It can't be as simple as the way that, you and I have been raised, right? So the way that you and I have been raised, generally speaking, is that one of the first things that we are taught to say, or that we teach our kids to say, especially for those who are Urdu speaking, right, is Allah ek, right? God is one. It's like one of the first things. We recite this to them over when they are going to sleep, right? You're putting your kids to sleep, or when you are being put to sleep, Allah ek, panjatan panch, that whole kind of thing that was there. This was it. God is one. Like that's the main thing. And I was reflecting on this once, like, okay, we have this whole sort of system of when you're going to sleep, you get these sort of like lines to memorize, right? Remember these things. Although most parents weren't really going into depth. They're not doing like a tafsir as they're saying Allah ek, right? Just memorize this stuff, that's good enough for now. I always wondered, I'm like, what do other religions do, like when they're putting their kids to bed? You ever think about that? What do people of other backgrounds do? The Christians, according, a lot of Christians, they have their sort of like good night prayer ritual, right? They get on their knees like that, and our Jesus, Lord and Savior, something, I don't know what they do exactly, but they do some sort of prayer at night. They have something there, right? I'm assuming Jews must have something else too. I don't know, Scientologists probably say something to Lord Zenu. I don't know what they're doing, right? Whatever. Everybody's got something. And then I'm like, I wonder what atheists do with their kids, right? Like we're saying Allah ek, I wonder if they're telling their kids Allah fake, right? Like I promise you that's my only dad joke for, like, and that's it. Every other joke was highbrow. This was the only dad joke that I had here this night. I promise. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Na'udhu billah, na'udhu billah, astaghfirullah. Okay. When we're telling our kids, Allah ek, or God is one, that's it. And that's how you and I, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years old, are saying, yeah, monotheism, tawheed, being a muwahid, means that God is one. That's it, we're done. Next, what's next on the list now? Oh, do I go into the sifat and the characteristics and the names? Like, hold on. I think we jumped a step here, right? Are we saying that tawheed is just some numerical thing? That the minute I know that God is this and not this, or that's it? Tawheed is just some numerical, quantitative thing? Oh, well, it's got to be more than that. And one of the ways we can kind of figure that out, and look, this sort of explanation of, God is one, right? That we don't believe in more than one God. It's not incorrect, obviously. It is correct. The issue is that it's deficient. It's like the bare bottom. It's at the bottom of the barrel. It's like the bare minimum that a person should understand, right? Because you have many other people of different walks of life, different backgrounds, who will say, yeah, there is one God. Now, what sort of relationship do I have with that God? That'll vary, right? There's this group called deists, right? I don't know if you know what deism is. So they believe that there's some creator of the world, but they're like, okay, it's kind of like this, when you wind up a car or pull back a car, right? Those friction cars, or a wind-up clock or something. Like, that's what that God did. They started the universe, and now they don't care what happens anymore. They're gone. That's what deists kind of believe, right? And, the quote-unquote founding fathers of America, they say a lot of them were deists. So believing in one God goes across a lot of lines. You ask a Christian too, they're going to say, yeah, we believe in one God, although their God happens to be a 3-in-1 triple changer transformer. But regardless, that's the way they are, right? So they're not going to say they're polytheists. They're going to say that we believe in one God too. Jews, same thing. There's a lot of people who believe in one God. Even for those who, there's different expressions of Hinduism, but technically even a Hindu, if they've read their scriptures properly, they'll say, look, there's only one, I don't know the fancy terms, but it's only one God up top, right? Right? So everybody's got that. So does that mean, half of deen, everybody's got it then? No, that's not enough. This number thing can't be it. It's got to be something deeper than that. Okay. Now, how can we figure out where this deeper thing is? And like we've said, there's ways where we can kind of go and make it up as we go along and say, no, this is what I think tawheed means. Or sometimes we're lucky enough where the Arabic does the work for us. Right? Sometimes the Arabic language itself is enough to say, no, there's a bit more to this. Since I've already mentioned the Transformers thing, I might as well mention it. There's more to this than meets the eye, right? So that's what we're going to try to do, inshallah, now. So there's going to be a little bit of slight Arabic grammar. So for all the true grammarians out there, forgive the sort of superficial understanding of this, but it should hopefully get to a certain conclusion and natija, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay. So we've got this word in our mind, tawheed. So take that. Now, most of you who have some bit of Arabic background, you know that in Arabic, things fall on these different sort of patterns, right? Wazn, ozan, something like that, right? Once you know a pattern, you can take these few 3, 4 root letters and just throw it and plug into any pattern, right? Copy and paste, put it into a pattern, you get these very sort of specific meanings. So let's take right now, we have tawheed. We first think of it as monotheism. Okay, let's take that, let's put it aside for now. I want to look at first other words that are very similar to tawheed, that are on the same sort of pattern. So for those who care, it's on the bab of taf'il. Okay. All right, nobody knows. There's probably one person at least who knew who just didn't want to say it out loud. That's fine. Okay. What are some other words that fit this pattern and are very similar? So I'll help you out with one. One is takbir, right? So takbir is on that same form, right? What is takbir? So is takbir just mean Allahu Akbar, or does it mean that you have to say Allahu Akbar? You have to say Allahu Akbar, right? So takbir is pronounce or say Allahu Akbar, right? So this same sort of form where you have to recite something happens a lot. Tahmeed, right, is saying Alhamdulillah. Tahleel is saying La ilaha illallah. So there's a lot of forms that are like that too. So you're starting to see that there's some pattern building right now. Okay. Let me give another one. Tafsir. What is that? What does tafsir mean? So that's usually tarjuma, right? But tafsir, what would we call that? What's some fancy words that we hear? Explanation, right? Commentary, right? But yeah, translation is a part of it too, definitely, right? So it goes hand in hand with commenting and explaining the ayat. So what is it? It's There's an action behind there. Somebody has to comment and clarify the meaning of these ayat, these verses, right? Okay. And you can do tafsir on a lot of things. Apparently, some weird speakers out there are doing tafsir on Marvel DC. I don't know who's doing that, but there's some very, very misguided speakers out there. But may Allah guide them, inshallah. So, tafsir. You're just going deep into something, explaining, bringing out deeper meanings. Okay. What else do we have? Tadfeen. Come on, if you're on the committee, you should know this stuff, right? Tadfeen, taghsil, takfeen. Yeah, so taghsil is coming from ghusl. You're performing the ghusl. Tadfeen, well, let's go in order. Takfeen, from kafan, you're putting on the kafan. Tadfeen, you're doing dafan. So far, everything we have has been what? It's an action. You're doing something, right? What is, now this one is let's go the other side. Takfir. What is takfir? What do Wahhabis do to us? Right? You guys are kafir, Shia kafir, right? They're doing takfir of us. They are going out, calling us, proclaiming us, trying to identify us as kafir. Anybody else think of any other examples? What do we recite after salah? Tasbih. It's a recitation. You're doing something, right? Now, I know some of our languages we call the actual instrument tasbih. It's misbah actually, or misbah, but whatever, it's fine, it's okay. Not a big deal, right? Anyway, any of these forms, you see that every single time it's an action. There's something you're doing, you're saying, that's what's happening there, right? You see the pattern so far? So now let's go back to Tawheed. Tawheed, how do we translate it? Monotheism. Does that seem like it fits with the rest of the pattern? Reciting Allahu Akbar, reciting Alhamdulillah, reciting La ilaha illallah, burying somebody, putting a kafan on, doing something every single time. There's an action. So in English, for you fancy English people out there, this is a verbal noun, right? It's talking about an action that's being performed. So monotheism is probably one of the, not the worst, but it's not on the money. It's not on the mark there. What might be a bit better is that Tawheed is monotheisting. That's a copyrighted word, by the way, right? I made that up. I don't take credit for a lot of stuff. That one I'm taking credit for, right? So I'll send you my Zelle afterwards, inshallah. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So if you're going to use it, you better credit me. That's what I'm saying, right? Okay. So, monotheisting, right? Where something has to be performed. What word is Tawheed coming from? What is one of the root words for it? Wahid, wahda, right? Which means what? Unity, right? Things being the same or together, right? Wahda. We should know this word, right? Dua wahda and things like that. So if we're trying to figure out how this stuff goes together, wahda is unity, right? It's this idea of oneness. And then Tawheed, the pattern of it should mean doing something. Then what should we be doing? Should be bringing things together, uniting something. Tawheed is trying to bring everything together, trying to figure out how this reality all comes together and is an expression, an extension, and a manifestation of Allah. That's what Tawheed is. Tawheed is not something that you believe, it's something that you and I have to do. We have to perform Tawheed. Not just believe in Tawheed, we have to perform it. And if you say that, yeah, I believe in Tawheed, that also means then that the performance should go along with it too. Meaning that if somebody says, I believe in the tasbih, for example, okay, that must mean you perform it too then. If you believe in it, you perform it. If you and I believe in Tawheed, that means we should be performing it too. But if that performance is just Allah'ik, right, God is one, that's a very weak performance, right? Very, very weak performance. That's not bringing things together. That's just words. That's just numerical stuff. Quantity. That's it. There's quality behind this. That's looking out at the world and trying to say, how does Allah want me to see stuff like this? How should I be viewing the mu'mineen and mu'minat in front of me? How do I see my spouse? How do I see my kids? How do I see somebody that's an enemy of the Ahlul Bayt? How do I see a co-worker that's non-Muslim? How do I see all these things? What way does God want me to understand this? Tawheed is trying to bring all of that and subsume it under what God wants. Trying to put all that together and say, going back to this idea of La ilaha illallah, that the only way, the only reality that exists is Allah's reality. That's it. Anything else that we say, we think, we do is false. It's fake. Anything that you and I make up, that's not Tawheed anymore. And you know what the opposite of Tawheed is? Come on, where's the Urafa? Come on, where are you guys at? The opposite of Tawheed, meaning trying to make things one, is takthir. Takthir, which is multiplying and increasing things. So what do? We start increasing things. This is separate, that's separate, this is mine, that's mine, this is my paper, this is my speech, my lecture, this is my cup, this is whatever, right? The ego wants things to be its own. And some of the commentators, mufassirin, right, using the word tafsir again, when they comment on the whole story of Iblis, Shaitan, all of that stuff, they say, look, there's a lot of different ways we can explain that story. You know, the way that I've heard many people explain it is that Shaitan was a racist. Like, what? Shaitan was a racist? Yeah, Shaitan was a racist. That was the problem. That's why he did what he did. Right? Because what did he say? When Nabi Adam alayhi salam's created, Allah says, bow down. He says what? Ana khayrun minhu. Hasan. I am better than him. So some people have taken this sort of modern day tafsir and said, yes, he is a racist. Right? I guess he wasn't part of the Human Lives Matter movement. I guess that was the problem, right? It was jinn lives matter for him. If you believe he's a jinn. If you believe he's an angel, it's a different discussion altogether. But so people said, yeah, he was racist. That was his problem. It was racism. It's like, racism? Like, it seems like a weird sort of modern interpretation of this. Go back, as the brother was saying here. What does he say? This is somebody who's been worshiping Allah for forever. Right? All of this worship, and there's different explanations about his sort of nature of worship. He's there, and then some random dirt creation gets dropped in his face. Forgive me, Nabi Adam, but hopefully he'll understand why I'm saying this. This random little dirt thing gets popped in front of him, and Allah's like, yeah, you got to bow down over there. He's like, I've been worshiping for all this time. I put in the work, I put in the effort, and then all of a sudden you just mold some clay, and this thing becomes the Khalifa? Now you tell me, does that seem rational or not? To make somebody unworthy, that's never done any work, that's never earned anything, that's going to be the Khalifa on earth? Even the angels were, in a sense, confused too, right? Are the angels racist too? When Allah says, yes, Adam, humans, they're going to be the khulafa. The angels are same sort of idea, like questioning, obviously, they're curious. Like, okay, we do your tasbih, we say la ilaha illallah, we do all these things, we do your dhikr and adhkar, we're doing all this stuff. If that's what you want, Allah, why this, little dirt, clay, turab, why this thing? How does that become your khalifa? Especially if they're going to come on the earth and spread blood everywhere and kill people and cause this violence. These same ones who are going to spill the blood of the grandson of the Holy Prophet. Why would they become the khulafa? This is not irrational thinking, is it? The angels were being very rational. What we would call rational, logical, scientific, so to speak, right? Shaitan was doing the same thing. We're putting it, again, not to say let's empathize with him, but we have to understand his train of thought that he's going at. So what do some commentators say, as you got it right? He said, look, Shaitan is saying it very clearly. Ana khayrun minhu. I am better than him. What he's doing is separating himself from Allah and from Nabi Adam. He's creating this separation. Rather than putting this stuff together and say, look, what Allah does, obviously Allah knows better. Everything is united, it's as a manifestation of Allah. If this creation, this human, this turab, whatever you want to call it, this dirt, if this becomes the Khalifa, that's because it's an extension of Allah. It manifests His names, however you want to describe it. That's what it is. If I don't see the picture, that's my lack of tawheed. He doesn't see it like that though. What does he do? He starts to disconnect Allah from Nabi Adam. He disconnects himself from Allah as well too. This sort of triangle gets formed right away. Right? That's what he does in his mind. He breaks it up. He's like, Allah, Adam, and me. Or actually for him it's Allah, me, Shaitan, and then Adam. Although in reality, right, وَكَانَ مِنَ الْكَافِرِينَ, really what he's doing is saying, me, Iblis, Allah, then Adam. That's what he's saying. Because he's saying, I know better. I know what ibadat looks like, what it sounds like, what it results in. Allah, how can you say something like this? That's what's going on in his mind. The problem is not about racism and ta'assub and stuff like that. Maybe it seems like that on the surface. His problem is a problem of tawheed. This problem is a problem of tawheed. Not understanding that Allah has set this specific world, this universe, this cosmos with a specific set of rules, and that the way that certain manifestations and expressions happen are beyond our understanding. And that's where this idea of submitting, if you saw it through Allah's eyes, you wouldn't have had this problem. And even when Allah said, why are you doing this? You could have asked for forgiveness too. You could have said, okay, Allah, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, right? Done tawbah, istighfar, he would have been fine, maybe. What does he do? He doubles down. It's like, no, Allah, I still believe in you, but you give me now some powers that I can mess with the rest of these people too. But you see the exact opposite with Nabi Adam alayhi salam. When the mistake happens, so to speak, I know people don't like that word, but whatever, tarke awla, mistake, and happened in a different dimension, whatever explanation you want to go with, when that issue happened of approaching the tree, and now there was this change, so to speak, when this happens, and Allah is like, okay, what's going on here, right? You're my Khalifa, you were told not to approach the tree, you and Hawa, we're not supposed to do it. Now what? He didn't double down. He didn't say, well, this, Iblis, this snake, or whatever came to me and tricked me. No. He said, Zalamtu nafsi, I made the mistake. This is on me. and now let me do istighfar and tawbah, and hopefully you'll accept me again. If he realized that it was his mistake, I'm not going to associate this stuff with Allah. This was my problem. So his tawheed was intact, which was Allah's point in the first place. It's like, shaitan, you're going to think that the way you do things, your ego is going to get built up, but now I'm going to show you how Nabi Adam, and hopefully his descendants, will be the exact opposite. That the sins, the guna, they'll blame themselves for that. They'll never blame me for that. But anything khair, anything good, the way they see reality will always be through my eyes. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So that's the sort of deeper understanding of La ilaha illallah. That there is no reality, there's no other truth, there's no haqq except for what Allah desires or demands. Another way of putting it, there is no other priority, there's no other hierarchy except for the way that Allah has decided it. So, nowadays people have a problem with, let's say, patriarchal religions and patriarchal systems. Like, okay, is that the way that it's supposed to be in Islam or not? Rather than letting, some other random individual tell me what society should look like. Well, okay, Allah, have you defined a hierarchy in society? Should a family unit look like this? How should it look? If that's the hierarchy you say, then okay, that's what I'll go with, because that's the way you envision the perfect family. And you've showed that to me because you've given me a perfect family with the Ahlul Bayt. So I see that too. Right? So He doesn't just give you abstract. Allah says, look, I'll give you the abstract theory, philosophy, and all that. I'll give you some meanings and deeper explanations in the Quran, and then I'll show you physical examples too in the Ahlul Bayt. So that way, at every level, you understand what I'm talking about. So you can see it, very deeply through my eyes in one sense. You can understand it maybe conceptually in your aql, right, in the deepest part of your soul. And then even for those of us who can't handle this deeper, abstract, philosophical thinking, all right, Allah, just show me now. Show me what it looks like. He says, okay, I'll show you the Ahlul Bayt. I'll show you what a perfect family actually looks like. Use that as your structure, and then you guys will be fine. Look at the Ahlul Bayt. This is my household, and you'll be okay. And this is the way that Tawheed needs to be implemented in our life. Right? Seeing things like this. We have this very famous, slightly controversial, but wonderful narration attributed to Amir al-Mu'mineen, Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salatu wassalam. He's reported to have said, مَا رَأَيْتُ شَيْئًا إِلَّا وَرَأَيْتُ اللَّهَ قَبْلَهُ وَمَعَهُ وَبَعْدَهُ. And in some versions he adds, وَفِيهُ. That I don't see anything except that I see Allah before it, with it, and after it. Meaning, what is he saying? I see Allah everywhere. In everything, I see Allah. In every single thing. It's Allah all over the place, right? Now, again, you see somebody who's a mu'min, right? Somebody in the center who does khidmah, who has good akhlaq. It's easy to see Allah's names in somebody like that, right? Somebody who's very kind and merciful and loving. Like, okay, yeah, I can see divine qualities like that. I get that. But when you see somebody that's, let's say, atheist, hates people who are religious, bad akhlaq and things like that, how can we understand seeing Allah like that? How do we think of that? Well, let's go to, again, a very sort of relevant example. How would we understand what Allah wants us to see when we see somebody like Yazid, or Umar ibn Sa'd, or Ubaydullah ibn Ziyad, or Shimr, or any of these individuals? La'natullah alayhim ajma'in. How are we supposed to see Allah in them, so to speak, right? That's a tough thing to do. It's a very tough thing to do. Some even say that's blasphemous. There is no Allah in them. You say there's no Allah in them, that's a problem. They're still a makhluk at the end of the day, although bottom of the barrel, obviously, like destined for hellfire eternally, fine. But how does Allah want me to see them? Well, okay, the way that Allah wants us to see them is described in many different ways. We have a ziyarah of Arba'een, inshallah, that we recite tomorrow. We have a ziyarah of Ashura. All of these things have these lines in there telling us exactly the way that you and I should be conceptualizing individuals like this. And it's interesting, right? Because nowadays, some people have taken these ziyarat, or these du'as, and all these things that we have been reciting for a long time, and they say, well, this stuff doesn't apply anymore. Oh, this thing doesn't make sense. Oh, this is too mean. Right? People don't, this is not right. Right? La'na doesn't make sense anymore. I think that's not nice. So a lot of people now have, again, almost the same thing to some degree that Iblis did. That look, Allah, the way that you saw it, the way the Ahlul Bayt saw it, that's cool, but you can keep your ideology. I'm seeing it a different way. Same way, right? Iblis, Shaitan said, look, dirt, fire, easy comparison. Fire, we're superior than dirt. I did more ibadah. I'm obviously more qualified for this position of Khalifa. Now some people think that they have the right to jump into the Quran, jump into the riwayat, say, look, this one, it doesn't make sense in Western society. Toss this out, toss that out. This is no good, this is no good. What is that person really saying? Ana khayrun minhu. I'm better than this thing. I know more than this Quran. I know more than these Ahlul Bayt, people who lived 1400 years ago. That stuff was back then for these Jahil Arabs. It wasn't for us. We have evolved. Oh, mashallah, we are insan. We have technology, right? Look at what we've created. Look at these wonderful things. Oh my God. Like, yeah, for anybody who wants to see the reality of humans, well, two directors, sorry, I just said I wouldn't do movies, but I'll do movies, fine. James Cameron and Christopher Nolan. Two of them both who are, most of their movies have to deal with how man has completely lost the plot. James Cameron specifically talks about class warfare, and very specifically our relationship and our arrogance with technology, right? So Titanic has all those elements, right? Arrogant about what man builds from himself. Terminator, some people don't understand that, but that's arrogance about what, artificial intelligence and what we're building. And obviously the newest one from Nolan is Oppenheimer. I mean, it's not a spoiler alert. We know what happens, what Oppenheimer built and did. America dropped 2 bombs. This is arrogance, right? This is what our technology has led us to. Like, you got so far ahead in your technology, but your insaniyat, your humanity you left that behind. You forgot where you were. You went forward in building all this stuff. That's cool. But you left morality behind. You left God behind. You left the Ahlul Bayt behind, so you have no idea what you're doing. So that's why you see these people who don't have a good relationship with the Ahlul Bayt, they're not going to have an understanding of how Allah wants us to see things. So that's why they'll be okay, as we're now bringing it back to this topic, they will be okay with, hey, this guy Yazid is running things, whatever, what does it matter to me? There's no free will anyway, right? Allah's predestined everything, so yeah, if Yazid's there, that's because that's what Allah wants. If Umar ibn Saad is there, if Ibn Ziyad is there, what do I know, right? Everything's been predestined. This is the aqeedah of many Muslims, right? That Allah has chosen all these guys. It's divinely picked. We have no say in it. That's their aqeedah and ideology, that there's no free will whatsoever. So for them, imagine in the future, Shaitan becomes the Khalifa of the Muslim empire. They're like, well, I guess that's what Allah wants, right? This is how sort of backwards this sort of thinking is. When you just remove yourselves from Allah's thinking, so to speak, right, without tashbih, from the Quranic type of thinking, from this tawheedi thinking, from looking at the way Ahlul Bayt have set aside these principles, the way that it's been passed down through the ulama, the urafa, etc. We've been divorced from that, so we've lost the plot completely. But you see, those who have kept on to that, who have held on to that, the way that they look at reality is completely different than everybody else. Completely different than everybody else. Where else do we get something like Ma ra'aytu illa jamila? How else are you going to get a statement like that after seeing your family slaughtered? Who else is going to say something like that unless you have a deeper ma'rifah of Allah? You have to see things like that. How else can you have somebody, a father, taking the body of their 6-month-old son, walking back to their tent and say, Allah, and no father should be able to handle something like this. This is not something that should happen to anybody, but Allah, you have decreed, I've done what I've had to do. I did my wazifa, I did my duty. I've done what I had to do. This is what you had desired. This makes you radi, so I'm radi with it too. And because you are watching, you wanted it to happen, then I'm okay with it too. Right? How else does that happen unless you see things through the eyes that Allah wants us to see things through? And this is why, again, going back to that initial point, this idea of remembering Karbala, Arba'in, all this stuff of coming back, it's to say, are we seeing things the way the Ahlul Bayt saw it? The way that Hur saw things, the way that Habib saw things, the way that An, Muhammad, Qasim, Akbar, everybody. Are we seeing it the way that they saw it? Or are we looking at it the way that these other individuals have seen it? As we mentioned, Umar ibn Saad, for him, this is just a power play. It's just politics for him. I want power, I want control. Right? So we have to be careful that in these months, we are supposed to be going back to this sort of tawheedi lens and tawheedi lifestyle. And be careful that we don't take the wrong sort of idea from this sort of episode and tragedy of Karbala, take the wrong messages from it, and start to make up our own things as we go along. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. This is that Husseini islah and restoration of our identity. He's saying, come back to seeing things the way Allah wants us to see it. Come back to practicing your life the way Allah wants you to practice. Come back to a Muslim lifestyle, that's it. Just go back to the way things should be, the way things were, and then these kind of things won't happen again. And some Muslims got it, not every Muslim did. One more salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. You know what's interesting is that Islam is really the only religion that actually focuses on God, so to speak, right? It's the only God-centric, although I don't like that word nowadays, but it's the only one focused on Allah primarily. Even in its name, right? Because the religion is Islam. Islam meaning what? Submission. Yeah, thank God. When people say peace, I get triggered very easily, right? People say Islam means peace. Like, okay, what is salam? Salam means peace. What is Muslim? Muslim means somebody who says peace or is at peace. Like, Islam is just peace, 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 peace all the time. No, it's like Islam is submission, right? This is a deeper concept. Yes, if you submit, you will find peace. That's the idea. But Islam itself means submission, right? Submission to Allah, submission to the deen. Okay, so Islam is focusing on submitting to Allah. What about other religions, right? Judaism, right? The name itself is, depending on which theory you believe in, either it's talking about the tribe of Judea or the area of Judea, whatever it is. So it's either people or a place, right? Or Hinduism, right? Hindu itself, right? From Hindustan, right? So it's a geographical location as well too. Other religions, Christianity, what's it named after? An individual, a personality, right? Christ. Buddhism, an individual, a personality. So much so that throughout history, especially Orientalists, other speakers, scholars, whatever, they have tried, non-Muslims obviously, they have tried to speak about our religion on their terms, right? So if you look at old books, people like Thomas Jefferson, even as early as that, or as recent as that, when they refer to, we went to the Middle East, we read about these people, they don't refer to us as Muslims. Do you know what they call us? Muhammadans. Because they say, yeah, it's the religion of Muhammad. We say, no, this is the deen of Allah. Right? This is the deen of Allah. Yes, it was brought down to us by Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But this deen, he's just a wasila for it, right? He's like, Ana bashirun wa nadhir. I'm just here to give you good news, and I'm here to pass some warnings on. This is not my deen. I don't call the shots for this, right? This is Allah's. I'm just the voice of this. I'm a messenger, right? That's it. Okay. So they tried to do the same thing because they thought, hey, isn't that what religion is? It's just following a bunch of people? Like, no. We are not people-centric, right? We're not scholar-centric. We don't scholar worship or anything like that. Our deen is back to Allah. Yes, Allah has said, follow and take everything from Rasulullah. Rasulullah has also mentioned the Ahlul Bayt. So we have the system that's been given down to us, right? The system of wilayah. The wilayah starts with Allah, passes down through all the prophets, right? With Rasulullah, obviously. That wilayah then extends to the Ahlul Bayt. The Ahlul Bayt then passes down to the righteous ulama. And that's how it's continued down to us, right? There's a system that goes all the way back to Allah. That's what keeps us intact. That rope, right? The hablul mateen that we hold on to. And that's why you see other individuals, when they try to break us, they try to break that rope in the first place, that chain. Any connection that we happen to have with ulama, they try to mess that up as much as possible. Any time, right? Put some doubts about maraji, right? A lot of people want to do that nowadays, right? Let's break them off from ilm and where ilm comes from. Let's break them off from that. Let's maybe, as some previous individuals did, Saddam did that, the Shah did that, let's put some of my own people inside of the Hawza to start messing people up. Put some spies in place, right? So Saddam did that, Shah did that, right? Shah of Iran. They started putting their own spies inside the Hawza. Right? And it's funny, there's our teachers used to tell us that one of the ways that, so what would happen is, let's say, so in Iran in some of the classes, a teacher would be there with students, there'd be like a Q&A and stuff, and some random person would come, again, libas, amama, all that stuff, sit down and start asking very clear, clear like spy questions, right? Like, okay, so what is your thoughts about the Shah? Stuff like that. So, like, okay. So, usually, the teacher would know better. I'm like, okay, hold on. You're a student of the Hawza, you're somebody, yeah, yes, I'm a student. Like, okay, can I see your amama? Like, yeah, sure. So they take the amama, they'd unwrap it and throw it. It's like, okay, rewrap that, let's see. Because this used to be something that was passed down from teacher to student, student to teacher, etc., right? Now, obviously, you can buy it in the bazaar and everybody can just put it on their head and run around with it, right? It's pre-made stuff. It's a little different nowadays. But back then, this was something that was passed down. So some random spy, if they had that pre-made one, whatever, once it was undone, they couldn't figure out how to do it. So they'd say, okay, thank you very much, go back and report back to the Shah, right? So we used to have this sort of, word am I looking for? This sort of investigation process. We used to have this almost, these ways where we could determine who's qualified and who's not to some degree, right? At least internally it happened in Iran. Do we have that same thing nowadays? You think? Do you know if somebody came and, let's say, said something outlandish, would you know if this is actually part of Islam or something that's, ghulu and it's extreme stuff? How would we know? Somebody who's a very good orator, right? I'm not, but somebody who's a really good orator, they can come and convince you and I of anything they want. Anything they want if they know how to speak very well, right? So we have to be very, very careful of these things. If we don't have a good barometer, it might be a good idea for us to figure out, the ulama that we trust, that we know, that, have a good background, are humble enough, and are willing to teach these things, say, look, what are some qualities that I should look for? What are some, whether it's specifically from, let's say, an academic perspective, or more importantly, more from an akhlaqi perspective, what are some of these things we should look out for before we start just watching any sort of YouTube video or listening to anybody's classes and things like that, right? Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Okay, back to Tawheed. So, Tawheed, right? It's supposed to be the life of our nafs. We're trying to tie this into the idea of getting more yaqeen there. So this initial sort of conversation we had was about seeing Tawheed itself in a different light. That I need to, in every single thought that I have, every behavior, every word I'm about to say, anything that I engage in, I need to think really, like deep down, this higher order processing. What does Allah want me to do in this moment? What is the most perfect action? What is the most perfect thing I could say right now? What is the most divine thing to do right now? If, for example, without being blasphemous, if I were to receive revelation, what would that revelation look like? Well, sometimes it's obvious, right? Somebody gives you alcohol, don't drink it. Okay, it's clear. We have ahkam that tell us, here's the do's and don'ts. Wajib, haram. Okay, that's clear. But sometimes it doesn't become that obvious. Sometimes when it's an akhlaqi matter, or it's a socio-political matter, right, or it's about community issues, sometimes it gets a little bit more difficult, right? That's why, you guys are lucky. You have resident alim here. So you can, filter these questions and ideas through him, and he in turn returns back the proper response, right? That's the idea. But not every community has that. Or sometimes some of these communities, they have somebody acting as an RA, so to speak, although I gotta say, I don't like that term at all, resident alim. You guys know where that term came from? Where's the other word? Where else would you use the word resident? Hospital, right? So one theory that one of my colleagues told me was that basically because most of these communities were started by doctors, it was like, well, I'm a resident oncologist, resident cardiologist, whatever, so we need a resident alim for our center, right? That's where they say that's where they say it came from. I don't know if it's true or not, but it seems like it makes sense, right? Khair. I myself don't like the term, but anyway, sorry. So this idea of Tawheed then, okay. Trying to bring things in terms of understanding it the way that Allah wants us to. Now, one of the problems that we face in this modern society too, and again, I'm only going to be able to mention it here. We're running out of time, so I'm just going to mention these points. And then, you're welcome to either ask afterwards or do your own research afterwards. Is Tawheed becomes one of those things where, again, we say La ilaha illallah, okay, Allah, you're the only priority. I should just listen to you, do what you want, follow the Ahlul Bayt, okay. Because right now, we're living in a society that has deemed belief in God to be foolish. Right? It's not what a human being, a logical, rational human being should believe in. Like, why you believe in this stuff? Why would you believe in God? It doesn't make any sense. So what happens is that whatever yaqeen that you and I thought we might have had for, we came to the we were raised with Allah, right? God is one. Came to our Islamic schools or our Sunday, Saturday school, whatever. It was reinforced. Then, in the community, we hear these points and stuff. But sometimes when we jump out to the outside world and we see that, look, there is a huge surge in atheism out there. Like, some people are calculating that in the Western world, you've got, so I think America, maybe you've got 20, 30% of people who are identifying as atheist. And people who claim to be religious, they're like, I do identify as religious, but I don't really believe in any of this stuff. So it's more like culturally, as we said, spiritually religious. Which at the end of the day, pretty much makes them an atheist too, right? Because their belief, actions are really no different. So, okay. And that's just America, where there's still a little bit of God left. You heathens in Canada and in Europe, it's much worse, right? Europe is really, really bad. Canada, I don't know the statistics, but I'm sure it's worse than America. That atheism is pretty much the norm nowadays, right? Believing in God is not a normal thing to do. Whether Christian, Jewish, Muslim, it's not a normal thing to do. It's a very, very strange type of belief system and behavior to have, right? To say that I believe in God being a creator and a book was sent down and prophets were sent down and there's these set of laws that I have to follow. Oh, have you ever seen God? No. Have you seen the prophets? No. Have you seen these imams you believe in? No. They'll say, you didn't see all this stuff and you believe in it? Like, do you have any proofs for this stuff? Some of us might answer, no, I just believe it in my heart. Or that's what my parents told me, so I go with that. And for some people that works. I'm not diminishing that, that's fine. But what happens to some of us in this society is that constant entering of doubt, the constant attacks when we don't have a defense set up, we don't have this like force field or shield, whatever, it starts to wear down on us. people are just hitting me from all different sides. Like, what else is left? And some people, they want to be able to respond, but they don't even know how to do it. And then because of that, they just kind of go off crazy. I don't want to mention the story because we're pretty much out of time. But for those who are interested, Mufaddal ibn Umar, this companion of the sixth Imam, right? Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. There's this book that's out there too, it's a long hadith, but they put it in book form, right? Tawheed al-Mufaddal. I don't know if any of you have seen it or heard it before. So there's this report. They report that this guy, Mufaddal, companion of the Imam, I'm going to give you, again, a very short version of it, just to drive home the point before we end. That Mufaddal, follower of the sixth Imam, he is in Masjid al-Nabi, kind of doing his ziyarat, a'mal, ibadat, all this stuff. Within earshot, there's these two famous atheists that are just talking out loud, but he's eavesdropping, he's listening to them, right? So these two atheists, let's think like a head, atheist philosopher teacher pretty much, and like one of his students. And they're talking, and they're saying this out loud. Like, because they're in front of Masjid al-Nabi, right? So they're in front of the presence of Rasulullah. So this atheist guy is like, man, look at this trick that Muhammad played on everybody. He fooled everybody, their hearts, their minds, he messed with them. He seized his power, he took control, and now look, his name's being recited out loud in these minarets all over the place. Look at this game that he's played. So now, Mufaddal hears this, and man, his blood is boiling. Most of us, if we heard that too, what would happen to us, right? Like the Hulk would come out, right? And that's what happens to Mufaddal. He gets up, he runs toward them, he's like, Ya ayyuhal kafir, and he starts screaming at them, right? He starts like, you kafirs, don't you know that God has done this, and look inside your heart. He starts screaming at them. And this atheist is like, hold on, who are you? He's like, are you one of the students of Ja'far ibn Muhammad? And he's like, yeah, I am. He's like, look, I've sat with your teacher before, and when I sit with him, I ask my questions, I make my statements and my claims. He sits there politely, respectfully, silent until I finish saying everything that I want to say. After that, he gives me questions or responses back that I have to think about. Always polite, always with akhlaq. He says, how can you claim to be a teacher of him? I always benefit from him. But you with this akhlaq? No. I don't think you are his student. If you are, I think you need to go run back to him and learn something. Now, Mufaddal's like, ouch. Man, okay. Heartbroken, he ends up running back to the Imam, tells him what happened. He's like, this is what happened. I didn't have a response. And this is where this sort of long narration happens, where the sixth Imam gives different descriptions or ways of proving Allah's existence, so to speak, right? So I'm not going to go through all that, but if you're interested, you can go in and read that. The whole point is that sometimes one issue that we have is akhlaq. We might have something to say, but we just don't know how to present it properly. We get really emotional. Somebody comes and challenges something within our aqidah and our faith, right? Somebody's like, I don't believe in tawassul. Like, oh, you muqassir, you kafir, how dare you say something like that? Like, hold on. Somebody's bringing up a legitimate question. If you don't have the akhlaq to respond, say, okay, I disagree, but you should go speak to a qualified alimi because I'm not in the right mindset to address that. We have to be able to check ourselves, right? We have many riwayat which tell us it's better not to engage in debate anyway because it's going to destroy your heart. It's really tough out there when you see these people, atheists, Wahhabis, all these groups. Their arguments seem so foolish, and I get angry too reading this sometimes. But I'm like, look, maybe they don't know any better. Maybe they haven't come across, good mu'mineen who have explained stuff properly. Whatever it is, maybe they had a bad experience, right? To some degree, we have to empathize with some of these individuals too. Some poor atheist, right, who grew up in, let's say, a Christian household, and they asked their priest or reverend some questions about, okay, can you explain to me the Trinity? And they're like, well, God is one, and God is three, and three in one, and He's the Father, and Son, and Holy Ghost. Does that make sense? And they're like, no. It's like, okay, well, it's blind faith. Sorry, get out of here. Right? That's the answers they get. That's going to confuse a kid, right? And they're being, shoved away. And sometimes that happens in our own communities too. Parents might push away their kids, don't ask questions. No, let them ask the questions. If you don't have the answer, that's the second part. Have the akhlaq, first of all. Have the humility to say, I don't know. And then follow up and say, look, that's a good question that you have. Let's go do some research. Let's go ask Sheikh Ja'far. Let's go ask Maulana Rizvi. Let's go ask somebody else and see if we can find the answer together. When your child sees that, oh, my mom, my dad, they don't know some things, but they're going to research, that will instill in them this kunjkavi, this curiosity, and they'll say, this is a lifelong journey that I can do. Again, this is tawheed. They're trying to bring everything together, say that if I'm journeying towards the infinite, towards Allah, then this journey towards Allah must be infinite too. There is no stop for me, right? From the cradle to the grave. Wallow bisin, to China. As far as I go, I got to keep on learning. And if the parents are setting that up for them, then the child will definitely learn this through observation. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So I'll have to stop here because time is beyond gone. If we were to continue, the next point we would have gone into was talking about what it actually means to be rational and logical in the first place. Everybody else accuses us of saying, your beliefs are not rational. They're irrational, illogical. You've got no real proofs for God's existence. Now again, I'm not familiar with, because I know many courses may have been taught in this community. Some of you may have gone through this stuff already. It's possible. But some of us may not have heard that stuff before. And it's good for us to have a background. And first, figuring out, and again, this is for you to research, or we can talk about it at some other point, or you can talk about it with another, an alim that you trust. What does it mean to be rational and logical in the first place? It's just some word people toss out, but what does that actually mean? Number one. Another thing is, why does everybody think that that's the only way to prove something? Why do they keep saying everything has to be rational and logical? Is the way that you and I, the way that we engage in our life, the most important things, are they always rational and logical? Or do we have other ways of proving that something's real? That's another thing to think about. And then at the end of the day, okay, after those two answers, what are the actual rational, logical proofs for God? At the end of the day, even if I don't care, I don't want to go and debate anybody else, maybe if I dive into that, maybe that slight little gap that I have in God's existence, if I sit there and see that we don't have just one or two, we have multiple levels of proof, all designed for people of different walks of life. There are so many proofs of God's existence. There's books dedicated to this for everybody of every different background, of every different philosophical, let's say, level. From some that are pretty much like 1-2-liners, right? This famous argument by design, right? World has organization and design. Anytime you see organization and design, there must be a designer. So this place must have a designer. A simple little 3 lines that nobody's going to deny, really, right? But there's some more to it, but that's very basic. Everybody understands that. Then you go to other ones which talk about a first cause. Then you go beyond that to these proofs of having a necessary being or necessary existence, wajib al-wujud. You have burhan siddiqeen. These get deeper and deeper and deeper, right? There's so much available. So for those who are interested, again, you can go and do the research. Maybe, for some of you, that might solidify and strengthen your iman. So look, like this has blown me away. I didn't know that all this was there. Or when it comes to other questions like divine justice, adl ilahi. Why is there good and evil in the world? Why do bad things happen to good people and vice versa? Books have been written. Shahid Mutahhari's Divine Justice is one of the greatest books that has been, written and then translated into English. And translated very well as well. It's good if you can find a teacher for that. It's better. But even on its own, it's good to go through. So that will, hopefully solidify things, right? Again, research, preparation, going out and getting it. Trying to bring everything under this sort of divine lens. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. If we want to think about musibah and masa'ib, we also need to figure out which lens do we see the masa'ib in Karbala. Which lens do we use to see that? Whose lens do we use? We've mentioned that normally we see it from the perspective of Imam Hussein. We see it from the perspective of Imam Sajjad. We see it from the perspective of Bibi Zainab. Right? We look at it through their eyes and see how they dealt with this. The ones who perhaps felt the masa'ib the most were the mothers of Karbala, more than anybody else. These mothers of Karbala who left their homes in Medina, some who joined the Imam along the way in Makkah or on the way towards Kufa, some who maybe have even left Kufa and in the middle of the night joined Imam in Karbala, right? Coming with their families, right? This is a perfect household. A mother, a father, children, sons, daughters. All of this, what? For the sake of Allah, for the sake of Islam, in the way of Imam Hussein. No one comes in close to the sacrifices and also the masa'ib of a mother. But we also see that the level of the masa'ib of the mothers in Karbala is also not equal either. In Karbala, most of the mothers there, what are they doing? They're giving away their children. They're giving away their brothers. They're giving away their husbands. They're giving away these men in the way of Allah, in jihad, right? To defend Islam. They're expecting when their son comes and says their final khudafis and salam to their mother, they know that their son is not coming back. They know their husband's not coming back. They know their brother's not coming back. This is how the mothers were in Karbala. But you see, not every mother was like that. That's why not every musibah is like this in Karbala too, because there's one mother that had no children that was being given away like this. See, there's one mother who, for both children that she gives away, she's expecting them to stay alive and remain with her. First, we see in Karbala, her son is thirsty. Rabab takes Ali al-Asghar. Rabab takes Ali al-Asghar and says, Ya Aba Abdullah, Ya Hussein, your young son, he's had no milk in many days, he's had no water, he's had nothing. Take him out to the battlefield and quench his thirst. See if there's maybe some room in the hearts of these individuals. Maybe there's some fathers out there that might quench his thirst. Yes, we know how evil they are, but maybe they'll help. And that's exactly how Imam addresses them. Aren't some of you fathers too? Don't you know how I am? Hussein, he says to us, Hussein says to us, Oh Shia, I wish you were there on Ashura in Karbala as Hussein was begging for water for his 6-month-old child. Remember that next time you take a sip of water, how Hussein was begging like this. Hussein now, Rabab is expecting Asghar to come back, either thirst quenched or not. But Rabab's expectation was that my 6-month-old child should come back. And this is why you see Hussein is going back and forth. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ridan biqada'ihi wa tasliman li amri. Ya Allah, what is Hussein supposed to do? He covers up the body of Asghar and his Abba. He comes back and he calls out, Zainab, hold back Rabab. Hold her back. But he doesn't hold back Sakina. Sakina comes running out, Baba. Baba, did they give any water to my brother? Did they give him anything? And when she sees what happens when Hussein uncovers this, Bunayya, Bunayya, Amithluka yunhar, do they slaughter babies like you, like they slaughter camels? Is this how evil these people are? Ajrukum Allah. Rabab, come with me now. Let's go behind the tents. Let's dig a hole there. Let's bury our 6-month-old child together. Imagine Rabab, imagine a mother having to not able to give anything to our child, and now she has to go back behind these tents in a place that she does not know. She's a foreigner there. She's gharib there. She has to bury her young child in there. This was something else that broke her heart. And then an Shami ghariba, after when the water now finally comes, when the wife of Hur brings the water, when it comes, when they wake up, Sakina, Utho, wake up, there's water here. They say first, she says, is my Chacha Abbas back? Is that why we have water? No, Abbas, your Ammu Abbas, Chacha Abbas, no, he's not back. Where did this come back? What happened? So no, the wife of Hur has brought this water for us. She grabs the water and begins running around. Sakina, where are you going? He said, Pupi Amma, don't you remember? You told me that the youngest should get pani first. Where is my brother Ali al-Asghar? He's the youngest. Sakina, did you forget? He's gone. He's become shaheed as well. And then even worse for Rabab, when she sees all this, finally, when these man'oon, they say, we remember that there was one body that was buried, there should be somebody else. They take their spears, they go behind the tents, and they begin driving this. And they pull out the body. Even when other individuals, when they saw the heads on the spears, they said, one of these heads is not like the other. Why is this head smaller than everything? Ajrukum Allah. How can a mother see the head of her child on a spear like this? From Karbala to Kufa, from Kufa to Sham, all this way. And if this wasn't enough for Rabab, now Rabab is there. After all of this torture, after all this bala, after all this oppression and dhulm that she's gone through, finally now there, when the cries are there in the zindan, when Sakina is crying, Baba, Baba, ajao, main nahi so sakta hu, Baba, I can't sleep anymore, Baba, help me. They say, one riwayat says that night, the daughter of Hussein had a dream, and she narrates herself that I had this dream, and I saw this lady there with her hand on her head, hitting her head over and over and over again. He said, I saw somebody else. I asked this person, who is this lady hitting her head over and over? He says, don't you recognize Hadihi Fatimatu Zahra? She says, this is my grandmother. Let me go complain to her. And she says, I ran to Fatima. I ran to her. He says, do you know what happened to my Baba? Do you know what they did to your son? Why weren't you there helping him? And Fatima says, I know what they did. I was there when they cut the head of my son. I was there when they took his clothes. I was there when they trampled his bodies. Don't say anything else, Bint al-Hussein. You are breaking the heart of Fatima. They say this is why Sakina woke up this night crying so much because of this dream. When Yazid hears this, he says, stop this crying of this girl. What does she want? She wants the head of her father there. They said, give her back the head of their father. I don't care anymore. The soldiers prepare the head. They put it on a dish. They cover this with a cloth. They bring it towards them. Imam Sajjad and Bibi Sakina are there. A dish is presented towards them. They say, what is this? This is what this girl has been crying for. First, Imam Sajjad takes the cloth, the cover off, and the narration say, when he sees the face, he says, from that day forward, I was never able to eat meat again when I saw I was never able to eat meat when I saw the situation of what they've done to the head of my father. When Sakina sees the head of her father, she takes it right away, begins kissing the head of her father. Baba, Baba, maybe now I can sleep again, Baba. She hugs the head of Hussein. She falls asleep. We don't know what dream she had. Some say this is where, they say she saw Rasulullah, she saw Hussein, and they said, Aaj jao beti, now you can come back to us. When she wakes up, they try to wake up Sakina. Sakina utho, it's okay. Now we're going to get ready to go back to Sham. Now Rabab maybe feels happy at this point. She says, now we can leave. We can go back home finally. They try to shake her. They don't. They turn, they tell Rabab, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Rabab, you will go home with no one. Rabab, everybody else, when they go home, there'll be somebody waiting. When you go back to Karbala, there'll be something there you can do. Rabab, who do you have now? You left one person in Karbala. You left one person in Sham. When you go back to Medina, who do you have for you? Even Zainab has her husband. She has Abdullah there. Rabab, this mother, the narrations say on Arba'in, when she reaches there, she was one of those who she sat there. Imam Sajjad said, okay, it's time for us to go home, return home to Medina. She says, what am I returning home to? There's nobody left. Hussein is here. Asghar is here. My Sakina is in Sham. I have nobody left for me. ألا لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون رضا بقضائه وتسليما لأمره. ماتم حسين.